Let's talk about accessibility in Portugal. I don't know what this person's disability is, and I do not have a disability, so I am not able to speak to my lived experience, but just my observations and some research. And I would say very confidently that if you have a physical disability, Portugal would be a massive challenge to live in. There are laws about accessibility, but as far as I understand, the laws basically focus on like public buildings, so government buildings or offices would need to be accessible, but most places aren't. And then you have things like public transportation, which do often have, like on the buses, they have the parts that come out so that wheelchair users can get on. They have accessible designated seating. Subway stations, like in Lisbon, I think most, but definitely not all of them, have elevator access. But the biggest thing to me is I've talked about before how incredibly difficult the sidewalks are to navigate. Even as an able-bodied person, I find them to be a challenge. If you take all the obstructions away from the sidewalk, if you fix all of the cobblestones so that they're all even, there are still spaces of the sidewalk which are so narrow that a person with a wheelchair or some other type of device would not be able to pass. And if you go to a place like Lisbon, you take all of that and then you add in hills. And then also, of course, you add back in all of the obstructions, the cars that are parked on the sidewalk, the trash cans that are all over the sidewalks, and you add back in the broken cobblestones, which also, when they get wet, are incredibly slippery. And I'm just going to say that it's dangerous. Now, obviously, in Portugal, there are people with disabilities, so people navigate it. But for example, from my office in my apartment, I can see out onto a road, and I watch somebody in a wheelchair go along the middle of the road, well, like in a lane along the road, because that's where he can safely, I guess, like the only place he can actually navigate his wheelchair because there's no space for him on the sidewalk. Now, if you have a disability, I think that, first of all, the world should be accessible for you as it is for me, but it's not. But I also think, like, hopefully there are ways that you can still navigate moving abroad, because I want that for you as much as I want it for myself and anybody else. If, a place like Portugal and the fact that it's not super accessible is really off-putting, then in Europe, I would recommend looking farther north where, socialism is more strong and they have more social supports, and I would imagine things like accessibility are better, but I haven't lived in those countries, so I don't know. That's just kind of my intuition of understanding the dynamics of different regions of Europe. But no matter what, good luck. I really hope that you're able to move abroad and escape the US.